Hey, what's going on? Welcome to Sequence Break. If you're a newcomer to this show, let me tell you what it's all about. In many cases, games have full control of what you're doing in certain situations, like they need you to have a special weapon to be in this certain area, or to have a certain character in your party before you talk to this other person. But what if we said to heck with all these scripted sequences and see what happens without these key things? And that's what Sequence Break is all about. So, without wasting any more time, let's get this show going with our special guest Swanky Box this week. I'm actually really excited about this particular episode. It gets a lot crazier than it did for the Breath of the Wild episode. But for our first sequence break, let's start right at the very beginning. So if you played Resident Evil 4 in any capacity, you have to know that at some point you go inside of this house, which then triggers this truck that's blocking your way to drive towards the police officers, which then opens up the path for you to go inside the village. So what I want to know is what happens if we walk past the truck without triggering that sequence whatsoever? Will the officers live later on in the game? Because as many of you know who've played through Resident Evil 4, you end up seeing the police officers' bodies during later sections. And probably not to anyone's surprise, the bodies still remain as you go through the story mode. But then I gotta know, is the truck still at the very start of the game? And yes, it is. The truck is still there as well as the police officers, which means that now there are two versions of each police officer in the world of Resident Evil 4, which will not be the last time you'll see something like this in this episode.
Forget your makeup or something?
Over here, stranger.
So this is the first time we meet that meme-worthy merchant, and sequence would state that you have to see him go through the window, greet you, then you walk around the building and see that he is there and he's willing to share his wares with you. But what if we skipped all that entirely and just walked outside the building to see where he is? And as it turns out, he's nowhere to be seen until you trigger that cutscene. And I mean absolutely nowhere. I would have just assumed that he would at least be where he's supposed to be after you walk behind the building at all times, but not even in that case. You have to trigger these cutscenes in order for him to show up in the spot where you can actually buy stuff from him. Breaking sequences that require the boat ends up doing a lot of weird damage to the game. For example, there's this save room here where you can travel between 1 and 2 areas of an earlier part of the game. However, if Leon were to trip one of the triggers that allows you to go to the next area without the boat, the game doesn't seem to know what to do and instead just places him outside of the map. As for Del Lago though, we have a series first for Sequence Break, a soft lock. If you trigger the cutscene where you're supposed to fight the boss, the game expects you to have the boat with you already by the time the cutscene is over. But if you don't have that boat, the game really just has no idea what to do at this point and just crashes the game. So the next boss that I want to sequence break is Bitores Mendez. Anyways, in this scene, you're supposed to leave Ashley behind and then Leon goes inside the building. But if we avoid that trigger and go inside the building anyway with Ashley, we can see that Bitores isn't in here whatsoever. But what I find way more intriguing is that if you do activate the boss fight and then leave the area before finishing the fight, something very odd starts to happen. You come back and the fire lighting motif is completely gone, but Bitores is still there. And if you kill him at this point, the cutscene that's supposed to play out where he dies never happens, and instead he just simply fades away. Yeah, that's kind of anticlimactic. Anyways, I'm gonna pass it off over to a very popular YouTuber named Swanky Box. Full disclosure here, all the footage that you're gonna be seeing after this point was compiled by him, but you will hear me commentate on scenes here and there just to balance it out. Anyways, take it away, Swanky Box.
Now this one's not really a sequence break per se, but it's still pretty interesting. On the way back to the village, once you are bound together with Lewis, there's a layer just beyond the game's boundaries that if you pass through it, it will actually remove Leon's hair. So you can totally see what he looks like if he has a buzz cut. Now I thoroughly hated the Boulder Dash events in this game. However, they are super awesome once you sort of remove the end animation to them. Now Leon normally runs down the hill and he has to dodge at the end to escape the boulder. However, if he runs past his final destination and if collision is turned off, he will run endlessly sort of in a big circle. Now the best part is after running for a while, his arms will just grow super long and turn to ski poles. Why this happens, I have no idea. However, it does happen at both boulder dashes, so it doesn't matter which one you're at. Now, a common thing in Resident Evil 4 is that you have to restore a pathway or something that you need to get across. Now, typically, Ashley doesn't really need the path restored. As you can see here, she can just walk across this water with no problem. Oftentimes, she just behaves as if the object is there. Now, I thought this was pretty interesting. All of the ceiling traps in the game, the ceilings that come down and have the spikes, all of them are on a timer, so that it doesn't matter if you're actually in the room, you will die anyways. Once the timer runs out, it just triggers a death animation regardless of where you are. Now, right after this first spike trap, there's actually two guys behind a wall that are on a big machine. Typically, you run down the corridor and then Ashley gets stuck in the hallway, and these guys burst to the wall with this giant death machine. Now, the funny thing is, if you go beyond the wall and shoot them, they will be dead when the cutscene plays. So you have this machine with two dead drivers that's just kind of coasting through the hallway. It's kind of funny because even though they're dead, they're still mumbling their cultist nonsense as well. Now, this one's not really a sequence break, it's more so a boundary break. Now, when you're fighting Salazar's right-hand man, the Vertugo, in the tunnels below the castle, the Vertugo is actually spinning above your head. And once you trigger the Vertugo to land at the room at the end of the tunnel, even though he's in the room with you, his tail is still spinning above the boundaries of the stage. It looks so weird. It's one of the strangest things, but awesome at the same time. Now, if you have Ashley in the room with the two El Gigantes, some funny things occur. Sometimes the El Gigantes will randomly freeze in place. One freezes completely with no animation and the other one just kind of stands there. I'm not exactly sure why this occurs because they can grab Ashley. However, I think it's because they're both trying to occupy the same space by grabbing Ashley. And because their animations are conflicting, they just freeze. And of course, while I was in here, I had to try it. So I put Ashley above the fire pit and I pull the lever. When you do this, you just teleport to the side of the pit, and you can't actually walk over the pit while it's open. There's like an impenetrable barrier, even if you have no clipping on. Now remember, Ashley is still with us because we skipped the bug kidnapping scene earlier.
So normally when you get to this point, Ashley gets kidnapped when you go through his door. And when you walk underneath this huge nest, there's an invisible trigger that starts a cutscene where Ashley is kidnapped by a giant bug. But if you no-clip around this trigger and solve the puzzle in this room, Ashley can then go with you to the next area, which causes a little bit of conflict here because Leon is looking at Ashley through the binoculars while Ashley herself is standing right next to Leon.
What's neat about skipping this kidnapping scene is that it puts Ashley in all the remaining areas in the game. Typically, you don't rescue her until the island, but up until then, if she's with you, funny things can occur. It's also kind of cool because she can typically interact with the environment as well. She can climb ladders, jump down, and so on.
Now this one's pretty similar to the one where Leon's running away from boulders. See, since we took Ashley with us to many of the scenes where she's not allowed to go, and she's now confronted with a ledge that she's never supposed to be able to grab or get up onto. And the way she reacts to this when she can't get up the ledge is her arms just go completely wacky.
Now, even though Ashley is with you, there are certain rooms that she will unload in. For example, the minecart room. Once you go inside, it will just be Leon. However, there's a lot of cool things that can happen in here. For starters, turning off collision and clipping outside of the minecart. What I find interesting is the mine tracks in the room can actually be walked on. And that'll play a role later when I talk about getting Ashley in here. However, even though you're outside the minecart, the button commands still take place. So you could be walking along and the ending animation in the minecart pops up and you will still fall to your death even though you're not inside the cart. Beyond that, the wooden beams you have to dodge inside of the mine can still hurt you and be interacted with when you approach them on foot. It's kind of funny because you'll just get smacked backwards if you touch one. So during the minecart area, there's a place where the cart stops. A man with a torch hits the switch, and in order to get the cart moving again, you have to shoot that same switch. However, if you no-clip out of the cart, this character actually takes a step forward every time he attacks. So you can lure him onto the minecart track, which is kind of funny because then you can run him over. Let's swing back to Ashley being in the minecart area. Now, I told you earlier that you couldn't get her down here because she unloads at the main entrance. But if you go through the whole mine and collect the pendant, and then go through the exit to the surface, you can then come back down the ladder with Ashley, and she'll appear at the bottom. Now, this part's pretty annoying, but you have to walk all the way back to the front of the mine. After a really long time, you'll finally get there. Now, Ashley can ride in the minecarts, and she can also get hit by the minecart. Getting hit by the minecart instantly kills her. If she gets hit by a wooden beam, she'll die instantly as well. What sucks though is that if you have Ashley in here, all the enemies and events are gone. So when you normally have to hit that switch with the fire-breathing guy, you can't do anything because the event didn't load. Shooting the switch does nothing, and you're essentially stuck here in limbo because you can't leave the cart.
In the island facility, there's a place where guys throw dynamite at you, and you have to kill them when the doors open. But if you go behind them, they don't know how to react to you. Compound that goofiness with the fact that when you kill them, another group instantly spawns on top of them and shoots you.
So if Ashley is still left over in your party from the castle area, and you bypass the garbage dump skip, naturally, you'll then work towards freeing Ashley from her imprisonment. Now this is where things get interesting because obviously you still have Ashley in your party, yet there's another Ashley in the cell. If you get the keycard and then come back to free her, some interesting things happen. For one, before you interact with her, her outfit is twitching all over the place. And when you finally do save her, now there are two Ashleys following you. These two Ashleys only exist in this one room. If you leave, the second one will disappear. However, if Ashley gets picked up by a ganado, she flies all around the room. Sometimes she even flies out of bounds and spawns way off in the distance. This probably happens because the ganado doesn't know how to respond if Ashley is captured and safe at the same time. I feel like all this conflicting logic in the game is what's causing all this craziness to happen. It's quite a funny sight. This is by far one of my favorite game-breaking moments.
Hang on, sweetheart.
Hey guys, SwankyBox here. Well everyone, that pretty much wraps up this episode of Sequence Break. I hope you enjoyed all the bizarre things we covered in this video. It was a lot of fun showcasing a lot of the weird things that I found over the years. I also want to thank Shesez for having me on the show. If you enjoyed this video, I highly recommend checking out the remainder of videos on this channel. Or if you want some more Resident Evil 4 goodness, I have a couple theory videos on my channel, talking about The Merchant, Dr. Salvador, and Las Plagas. Regardless of your choice, I hope you enjoy. And I'll see all of you in another video.